Back on halftime here. We'll go to the phones. Good friend Connor O'Gara joining us from Saturday Down South, the day that the AP preseason poll is released. Connor, I hadn't realized it, but you pointed it out on your Twitter feed. Who voted for Northwestern off of a 1-7 record? This must have been just a comedic moment for this voter, knowing that he wouldn't have to make that vote again this season.
You know, there's a tab on the AP poll where you can find all the voters, how they voted exactly. And I know Reddit College Football puts that up every single AP poll where they have every single poll from the voters. And I've been waiting to see that. I haven't found it yet. And I don't want to be a jerk about it. I just want to have a conversation about why a team that was 1-8 in the Power 5 conference last year, that was outscored by 15 points per game, that just added a new quarterback from a certain Indiana university, shout out to my alma mater, is all of a sudden worthy of being a top 25 team. That's all the only conversation I really want to have.
So I was reading through these Athlon sports quotes of anonymous coaches dishing on other SEC programs, and they had a lot of fun with Arkansas. And I'm just not quite sure about what some of these things have said here. The offensive line isn't horrible. Well, they were. Maybe it could be a little bit better. Looks like the NCAA sanctions have hit them. They've got no personnel. I mean, what do you say about wide receivers, running back, quarterback? There's good personnel there. But it is fun reading some of this stuff. I still don't know, though, if I believe all of these quotes that I see from these coaches about Arkansas. Total mess from top to bottom. That sounds more like 2019 than 2020.
Yeah, I didn't understand that either, just because for the exact reasons that you just mentioned. I mean, I have my concerns about somebody like Felipe Franks, and like I said many times, I think he's the Jameis Winston of the SEC, but at the same time, like, the guy he has won a New Year's Six Bowl as starting quarterback at Florida. Like, he's not a slouch. I mean, he was the season-long starter in a Dan Mullen offense, did pretty good at it. I think that there are a lot of people who are simply looking at the upperclassmen at Arkansas. And if that's the opinion that they have of it looks like a program that's been gutted by sanctions, I think it's more of like maybe from a physical standpoint, they're not going to be able to match up with with those in the SEC, at least at the line of scrimmage, because I do think that's the biggest concern for Arkansas, despite the fact that they added someone in Sam Pittman who obviously knows a thing or two about offensive line play. So I think if you're coming up with that take, you're simply looking at that element. And as we've seen in the SEC, I mean, you got to have those veterans. Going through that strength program is so important, especially at the line of scrimmage. But, I disagree that Arkansas is a significant step behind at the skill player positions when you have someone in Rakeem Boyd who I have no idea how he did it, but averaging 6 yards per carry in a Chad Morris offense will never cease to amaze me. And he did it twice. So, I mean, I think that with the combination of their two stud young receivers, I think makes Arkansas a little bit more promising than those that continue to pour dirt on them would suggest.
A lot of us here in Arkansas are targeting the second game of the season, Arkansas-Mississippi State, as a chance to break what we're expecting to be a 20-game conference losing streak since you opened with Georgia. I think Mississippi State could be on the decline this year. Now, look, I know they've got Costello quarterback, Kylan Hill returning at running back, but I'm just not sure about the rest of that team, and certainly defensively they are going to decline. Plus got a new DC, brand new scheme, lost 7 important players from last year's defense. I think that's a game that Arkansas can win, and I legitimately do think Mississippi State is going to decline badly this next season. What say you?
I don't know how badly they'll decline. I think defensively they're going to take a step back. I mean, that is inevitable. I don't think people really have processed just how much defensive talent they have lost to the NFL the last 2 years. It's staggering. I mean, seriously, like more than half of their rosters, more than half their defensive starters we're talking about, where they have 6-7 guys who are like legitimate early round picks in the NFL, and even someone like Brian Cole as well, who's really important for them as a senior, is another guy who's off to the NFL, and somebody like Willie Gay, who was in and out of the lineup last year because of disciplinary reasons, was really important for that team, and Cam Dantzler as well. I think that's the biggest issue right now is defensively, even with Zach Arnett, someone who led a San Diego State defense that was number 2 in the country last year, albeit with the support of Rocky Long, who's considered one of the better defensive minds in the sport. I think that this is it's a very tough Mississippi State group to dissect, because I haven't seen this version of the air raid offense in the SEC, where I do think Mike Leach wants to throw the ball 50 times a game, because that's what he's done in all but 1 year as a Power 5 head coach. I don't know if they have the offensive line to be able to do that. I don't know if they have the offensive line that's going to be able to keep KJ Costello upright and to be able to take advantage of some of those matchups. I am still excited about the idea of seeing Kylan Hill in this offense, but because of all of those moving pieces, I think you're right that it is a potential chance for Arkansas, if it is disciplined on the defensive side of the ball with Barry Odom leading that group, that could be a potential upset opportunity where you're not going to have to worry about, some sort of you're not like going into Mississippi State where there's going to be cowbells rocking or something like that. I think that is definitely an opportunity. And if Arkansas is going to hit the over on that regular season over/under win total, you got to be able to catch a team like Mississippi State early on like that.
Speaking of Connor O'Gara here on halftime, Connor, what about Ole Miss? Because I think obviously Mississippi State should be a good opportunity to break the win streak. Ole Miss is another team that theoretically Arkansas should match up with well. What says you?
Well, the big question that I have with Ole Miss is obviously who's going to be running the quarterback position in Lane Kiffin's offense. Because if it's John Rice Plumlee, I think that's a fascinating team to watch this year just because of the skill set and all the different things that he has been able to do as a runner, as a true freshman in the SEC. Now, that could really test just how disciplined Arkansas is from a tackling standpoint, because I think with Barry Odom, I've said this multiple times, I think that's the area that they're going to be most improved year one, is you're going to see guys that are actually in position to make plays, and it's not going to look as dire as it did for so much of SEC play for that Arkansas defense. But don't get it twisted. Ole Miss might have been a 4-win team last year. For my money, they were the best 4-win team in the country. They were the most electric 4-win team as well. And I think they returned so much from an offensive standpoint with Elijah Moore, who obviously didn't go out on the best note with the way things ended in the Egg Bowl last year with his infamous celebration. But that team with Jerry Neely just returned so much talent. And I think that's a tough matchup from that standpoint. Now, defensively, I have zero confidence in Ole Miss. I rank them as my worst SEC defense going into 2020 just because I have major questions about the defensive hires that Lane Kiffin made on that coaching staff with DJ Durkin and Chris Partridge. And I'm not sure if they're really the on-the-field guys who are going to turn things around there after Mike McIntyre did such a great job last year in his lone season in Oxford. But, I think that it would really depend on what that Ole Miss offense is going to look like, because John Rice Plumlee is a tough dude to stop. Just ask LSU about that.
Do you think moving forward, as you look ahead, and I assume that the majority of the people probably enjoy the all SEC schedule, except for Arkansas fans, just because it could end up in the 0-10, 1-9, 2-8 year. But when you look at it as a whole, and there was a lot of positive reaction, especially when they revealed the schedule amongst the media members, do you think this is something that the SEC should consider keeping permanently, or maybe adapting it to like a 10+1, 9+1 model moving forward once the pandemic hopefully is under control? Is this something you think they should look forward to or move forward looking into?
Should look into and will look into are two different discussions. I think that there's a very small percent chance that this actually happens moving forward, for the simple fact that even with this schedule stuff, everything that the SEC does is based on putting its contenders in the best possible position to make the playoffs. And the SEC has been able to have this 8-game conference schedule along with the ACC, while others like the Big Ten went from an 8-game conference schedule to a 9-game conference schedule. Why did the SEC do that, you ask? Well, the SEC feels like, and deservedly so, that its conference schedule is in nature just as tough, if not tougher, than the Big Ten schedule with 9 games, even though the SEC only has 8. So the only way that I think the SEC would actually do this moving forward is if all of a sudden these group of 5 teams, if they were just gutted by this pandemic and there were just so few to choose from, and the Power 5 commissioners agreed, we've got to be able to pivot. Maybe we need to come up with a system where it's a 10-game conference schedule and we have one group of 5 slash FCS matchup and then one Power 5 non-conference matchup. And it would take all the Power 5 commissioners getting on the same page. And as we've seen throughout this pandemic, that is not an easy thing to do. And I think that Greg Sankey would basically have to have his hand forced, or as a result, you would have to have a TV package so lucrative with these added games against SEC teams that even with, potentially losing a home game, which that's another thing that you got to keep in mind if you were to go to a 10-game conference schedule, is that you'd be taking away at least one home game per SEC team. If that money were to outweigh that loss in home attendance or all those different things, and if everybody was on the same page. But again, it would take that exact thing in order for this to happen. It's not going to be as simple as the SEC saw that a lot of fans were really interested in the 10-game conference schedule, and therefore this is automatically going to happen. If it were that easy, they would have done it years ago.
Let's end on a thought on college basketball here, because there's much more national leadership from the NCAA in basketball than there is in football, in which there was none. And it's Dan Gavitt, the guy who's the VP of the basketball tournament for the NCAA, and we know that makes 90% of their money, so they're going to focus pretty heavily on that. The NCAA might not survive without a basketball tournament. So Gavitt, I think it was last week, said by the middle of September there will be guidance to when the basketball season can start. And there just seems to be so much more trust in the leadership nationally for college basketball than anything of what we saw from college football. Now, I'm not asking you about should college football have a commissioner, but it's just so interesting to see how completely diffused the power structure is for college football. But for basketball, there is a central power, and it is Dan Gavitt, and he has just about everybody's respect.
Well, let's think about it. What motivation does college football have to really unite? I mean, they're not dependent on the NCAA for their postseason tournament. It's the college football playoff who controls that, and ESPN really with the TV deal as well that has such a big say over all this. Whereas the NCAA controls its postseason tournament, and therefore you do have more of a unified leadership group that says, "Hey, we need to get on the same page," because going 2 seasons without an NCAA tournament would be devastating. And any reason that they have to figure this thing out now, having already seen the byproduct of having their postseason just completely gutted, I think that they are more motivated than ever. And if that means getting us to a place where we have bubbles for conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament, I'm here for all of that. And I think that's a really good thing. I just think it's different, and it speaks more to the national nature of college basketball as opposed to college football, which has never been more regional than it is right now. And I think that's the problem that is going to continue to stand in the way of college football, and why, in my opinion, even if they were to get a commissioner, which I don't think is going to happen in college football because it involves, the Power 5 commissioners handing over power, I do think that, the NCAA, with their involvement in college basketball, is always going to make more sense, and they're always going to be more on the same page than college football.
Okay. Well, today's National Waffle Day, so let's get one last thought. Waffles, pancakes, or crepes? Which one would you go with?
Ooh, well, that's a good question.
That's interesting. Give me waffles all day,
my man.
Day. And I had pancakes over the weekend. We've got the griddle. We've got the waffle maker as well. That was one of our favorite wedding presents. God bless the person who got us that. My goodness, we make good use out of that thing. The waffle maker, once you have it in your home, the possibilities are endless, and that's the thing that I can't do without. Waffles are they're never gonna let you down. You can have bad pancakes. It's very easy to mess up a pancake. Waffles, I don't know. That to me, just in terms of elite breakfast food, that's up there with the best of them.
Okay. You always come with a good opinion about food and football, Connor. Good that these things go together. Thanks for your time, man. I know we don't have you next week, so have a good trip, and a couple weeks away we'll be talking football.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Connor.
Absolutely. The thing about waffles that no other food has is they've got a little reservoir for your butter and your syrup.
Yes.
I mean, it holds it perfectly, absolutely perfectly. A little dollop of butter, just enough syrup, and there's no taste just like that. Of course, whatever it is you want to put in those little reservoirs of flavor, it's up to you. Ty Richardson would probably put ketchup in them.
Probably.